Now, I don't have a single with every album. I never, hardly ever have a single. And it's a fluke, if I get anything that really gets out there and gets played. And
He fired his band mid-tour. He walked away from millions. He made albums nobody asked for and refused to explain them. For over 50 years, Neil Young has been rock and roll's most uncompromising voice.
I crossed the ocean for a heart of gold.
Not the loudest, not the prettiest, but the truest. He never chased trends. He never softened edges. He followed his instincts even when they led him into the wilderness. Behind that raw, howling voice lived a student of purity, a seeker of albums that never bent, never broke, never apologized. These 10 records were not just favorites. They were untouchable, sacred standards of artistic integrity.
Is there a particular story behind Harvest Moon?
That's one of my favorite songs because
Here is what shaped the man who refused to compromise. 10. Bringing it all back home. This was permission to evolve. When Bob Dylan went electric in 1965, the folk purists called it betrayal. Neil Young called it courage. Bringing it all back home was Dylan refusing to be trapped by expectations.
He put plants in the bed, but the phone's tapped anyway. Maggie says the men say they must bust an early man. Orders from the...
Side 1 roared with electricity. Side 2 stayed acoustic. Dylan was not choosing between worlds. He was claiming both. And Neil, watching from the wings, learned the most important lesson of his career.
I think there's been some amazing writers over time.
Growth meant losing fans, and that was the price of staying alive. Subterranean Homesick Blues hit like a manifesto. Fast, furious, packed with words that tumbled over each other. Mr. Tambourine Man floated like a dream. Dylan was not consistent. He was restless. And restlessness, Neil understood, was honesty. When Neil plugged in years later, when he shifted from folk to grunge to whatever came next, he was following Dylan's blueprint. Never stand still, never apologize. Evolution is not betrayal. It is survival. 9. 40 Greatest Hits. This was a heartbreak as religion. Hank Williams did not sing songs. He confessed sins. Every note dripped with whiskey and regret.
Change your way of living, change the things you do, stop doing all the things that you oughtn't to.
Your cheatin' heart, I'm so lonesome I could cry, cold, cold heart. These were not performances. They were wounds opened for the world to see. Neil heard that rawness and recognized himself. Country music taught him that pain did not need decoration. 3 chords and the truth. That was enough. Hank died young, broken, alone in the back of a Cadillac. But his voice survived, fragile and haunting. Neil carried that ghost his entire career. When he sang about loneliness, about loss, about roads that led nowhere, he was channeling Hank, honesty, the refusal to pretend everything was fine. Hank Williams proved that vulnerability was not weakness. It was the most dangerous weapon an artist could wield. Neil never forgot that. 8. Kind of Blue. This was the sound of space. Released in 1959, Kind of Blue taught Neil something rock musicians rarely understood. Silence matters. Miles Davis did not fill every moment with noise. He let the music breathe. So what? Blue and green, all blues. These tracks moved like fog rolling in, slow, deliberate, hypnotic. Miles played fewer notes than anyone else and somehow said more. Neil listened and heard a different kind of power. Not volume, not speed, restraint. Miles knew when to hold back, when to let a single note hang in the air until it became a statement. That patience influenced Neil's guitar solos for decades.
Felt it in our own unique way as well, obviously.
The long, sustained notes, the space between phrases, the refusal to rush. Kind of Blue proved that jazz and rock were cousins. Both spoke in feeling, not just sound. Miles taught Neil that what you do not play is as important as what you do. 7. Rubber Soul. This was pop music growing a spine. When Rubber Soul arrived in 1965, the Beatles stopped being cute. They started being serious. Norwegian Wood, In My Life, Nowhere Man. These were not singles designed to make teenagers scream. They were introspective, melancholic, searching.
Like years, yes, it seems so long.
The Beatles had grown up in public, and the world had to catch up. Neil heard that shift and recognized it as permission. You could be popular and deep, commercial and artistic. Those were not opposites. What struck Neil most was his honesty.
The Beatles meant a lot to me, and Paul's music, and particularly his bass playing at that time.
The Beatles were not hiding behind personas anymore. They were asking real questions. Is this all there is? Where do I belong? The acoustic guitars were softer. The lyrics are more personal. Rubber Soul felt like a conversation, not a performance. Neil absorbed that intimacy. When he wrote After the Gold Rush and Harvest, he was channeling that same vulnerability. The Beatles showed him that maturity did not mean losing your audience. It meant trusting them to follow you into darker, deeper water. 6. Blue. This was a vulnerability without armor. When Blue dropped in 1971, Joni Mitchell did not hold anything back. Every song felt like reading someone's diary without permission.
Baby, well, come on.
River, A Case of You, California. These were confessions set to melody. Joni sang about love, loss, loneliness, and doubt with a rawness that made you look away and lean closer at the same time. Neil heard that fearlessness and recognized a kindred spirit.
Special. I love Joni. She's wonderful. She's one of the greatest artists of our generation.
What moved Neil most was Joni's refusal to protect herself. She did not write from a distance. She wrote from the wound. Her voice cracked with emotion. Her guitar work was delicate but precise. Blue was not polished. It was real, and real, Neil understood, was the hardest thing to be. When he wrote songs like The Needle and The Damage Done or Old Man, he was following Joni's lead. Strip away the production, remove the safety net, stand naked in front of the microphone and tell the truth. That took more courage than any guitar solo. 5. Music from Big Pink. This was Americana reimagined. Everyone was chasing cosmic sounds and studio tricks. Then, the band released an album that sounded like it was recorded in a barn, and it changed everything.
Never could believe.
The Weight, Chest Fever, Tears of Rage. These songs felt ancient and new at the same time, rooted in tradition but pointing toward the future. Neil heard it and found his direction.
Get high one way or another, just to relax and listen to the music.
What struck Neil most was the simplicity. The band did not need gimmicks. They had stories, harmonies, and a groove that felt like breathing. Robbie Robertson's guitar was understated. Levon Helm's drums were loose and human. Richard Manuel's voice carried ghosts. This was not about showing off. It was about serving the song. Neil absorbed that philosophy completely. When he made Harvest and After the Gold Rush, he was chasing that same earthy honesty. Music from Big Pink proved that roots could be radical, that looking backward could push you forward. 4. Exile on Main Street. This was chaos refined into genius. Released in 1972, Exile on Main Street sounded like it fell apart and somehow stayed standing. Recorded in a French basement during tax exile, the Stones captured lightning and filth. Tumbling dice, rocks off, shine a light. Every track felt loose, messy, gloriously imperfect. Neil heard that disorder and found beauty in it. What resonated with Neil was the authenticity of imperfection. The Stones didn't polish their mistakes. They celebrated them. Vocals buried under guitars, drums stumbling forward, everything bleeding together into one magnificent blur. This wasn't studio precision. This was sweat and instinct captured on tape. Neil understood that perfection could kill spirit. Sometimes the best recordings happen when control slips away. Exile proved that accidents could be sacred, that roughness had its own elegance. When Neil made Tonight's the Night in Zuma, he chased that same wild energy, unvarnished, unafraid, undeniably alive. 3. Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. This was Neil finding his tribe. Released in 1969, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere wasn't just another record. It was the beginning of a partnership that would define decades.
I wish that I could be there right now.
Crazy Horse didn't play tight. They played true. Cinnamon Girl, Down by the River, Cowgirl in the Sand. These tracks sprawled, roared, and refused to quit. Danny Whitten's rhythm guitar locked with Neil's lead in ways that felt telepathic. This was communion through amplification. What made it untouchable was the lack of pretense. Crazy Horse never tried impressing anyone with technical wizardry. They served the feeling, not the technique. Solos stretched past 10 minutes because that's how long the emotion needed. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was calculated. When Neil howled through feedback-drenched leads, Crazy Horse held the foundation without flinching. They understood that sometimes music isn't about showing what you can do. It's about showing what you feel. This collaboration proved that the right partners don't make you better. They make you braver. They give you permission to stretch beyond reason, beyond structure, into something primal and necessary. 2. Bert Jansch. This was the acoustic blueprint. Released in 1965, Bert Jansch's debut arrived with zero fanfare and infinite influence. The Scottish folk guitarist played like his fingers held secrets.
Dust till dawn, I'm walking. Can you hear my guitar?
Needle of Death, Angie, strolling down the highway. These weren't sing-alongs. They were meditations carved from wood and wire. Neil discovered this record early, and it rewired his approach to the six-string forever. What captivated Neil was Jansch's darkness. British folk carried shadows that American folk often avoided. Jansch sang about addiction, despair, wandering without destination. His finger-picking was intricate yet never flashy. Every note served melancholy. Every phrase deepened the ache. Neil absorbed that technique and emotional palette. When he wrote Helpless or The Needle and the Damage Done, Jansch's ghost hovered nearby. Bert Jansch proved that an acoustic guitar could be as devastating as any electric weapon. That folk music didn't require cheerfulness or protest anthems. It could just be honest, dark, and utterly human. Neil carried those lessons across every unplugged moment of his career. Jansch showed him that sometimes the quietest records cut the deepest. 1. A Love Supreme. This was Transcendence in 4 parts. Released in 1965, A Love Supreme wasn't entertainment. It was a pilgrimage. John Coltrane didn't perform these compositions. He channeled them. Acknowledgement, resolution, pursuance, psalm. This wasn't jazz seeking applause. This was a musician reaching for something beyond language, beyond structure, beyond ego. Neil listened and understood that greatness required surrender. What made it untouchable was Coltrane's absolute commitment. He wasn't hedging bets or playing safe. Every note was offered up as prayer. The saxophone didn't just carry melody. It asked questions that had no answers. It wailed. I searched. It refused to settle for anything less than the divine. Neil heard that spiritual hunger and recognized his own restlessness reflected back. Coltrane's willingness to risk everything for artistic vision became Neil's compass. When critics hated trance or arc, Neil didn't retreat. When fans walked out during experimental tours, he kept pushing. A Love Supreme taught him that compromise was spiritual death, that artists must follow their vision even into isolation, especially into isolation. This album represented the ultimate standard, total fearlessness in pursuit of something larger than yourself. Coltrane died chasing transcendence. Neil spent his entire career doing the same, not copying the sound, but honoring the search. That made it forever untouchable. Neil Young never played it safe because these albums showed him safety was surrendered. He chased the untouchable his entire life, not to reach it, but to honor it. Integrity over comfort, truth over applause, evolution over stagnation. If this journey through Neil's uncompromising influences resonated with you, subscribe for more stories from artists who refuse to bend. Keep searching, keep listening,